IB Nation, welcome to the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It is Saturday, May 25th. What an awesome day if you're a Notre Dame fan. You just got done watching the Notre Dame men's lacrosse team beat the University of Denver, which is my wife's alma mater, by the way. But she was rooting for Notre Dame. Don't worry. And, of course, right after that, big-time commitment for Notre Dame, one that we were expecting but still exciting, and that is the commitment of Mark Zackery, the 6-foot, 165-pound, really talented two-way standout cornerback, also a dominant wide receiver in high school, just committed to Notre Dame over Michigan, Florida, Cincinnati, and a host of other schools. This is a big one for Notre Dame. This is a commitment that has been in the works for a while, and Notre Dame has been the leader for a long time. For those of you that listen to Mark's show, he talked about that. Like there really wasn't anybody else. There were some schools that tried to get involved. Georgia hosted him for a couple of visits. Bama offered him within the last couple of months. Florida offered him within the last couple of months. End of the day, this one was always the one where Notre Dame was in a great position to get this one done. And so we're going to break down the commitment of Mark Zackery to Notre Dame. I'm going to talk all about it. We'll do backstory. We'll do class impact. We'll break down some film. We'll talk about what's next. What's next, we'll talk about the 25 class from a secondary standpoint, and then we'll also look forward to 2026 and give you guys some early names to know in regard to who is going to be sort of the early board guys for Notre Dame cornerback in the 2026 class. And then at the end, I'll talk more specifically about the 2025 corner class as a whole. We'll do a little bit on the class impact, but I really want to talk about that and then what it means for Notre Dame that they were able to land this type of class. So just a really, really big day for the Fighting Irish, for all you Notre Dame fans. But I tell you what, there's a lot to be excited about right now with the way things are going with recruiting-wise. So let's dive into it. Today's show, breaking down the commitment of Mark Zackery. So to begin, let's just do a little bit about Mark Zackery. For those of you who may not be as familiar with this young man, this is a very talented football player. He is from Ben Davis High School in Indianapolis. He has a state championship as a football player. He also has a state championship as a basketball player. He's a starting point guard on the Ben Davis basketball team. Listed as 6'1", 165, very long-limbed cornerback that we'll talk about. Rankings are a little all over the place. He's a consensus, I believe, top 250 kid. Grades out as a top 100 player on the Irish Breakdown board. The highest ranking for him nationally is with 247 Sports, who has him ranked number 59 overall. Now that he's committed to Notre Dame, maybe that changes down the road, but we'll see. As of today, when he committed, he is the number 59 overall player in the country. Big-time pickup for Notre Dame. And when you talk about being able to land in-state players, this is obviously a player that you were able to get in-state. Let's talk about sort of the recruiting profile. As I mentioned, consensus 4-star kid, consensus top 250 player. He's ranked, I believe, let me check this real quick. I believe he's ranked in the 80s in the On3 consensus rankings. Let me just check that out real quick. I believe that is where he is, which gives you a little bit of a sense of what the profile is. 89. Yes, he's number 89 on the On3 consensus ranking, which shows you just a glimpse of how everyone has him. The lowest ranking that he has is ESPN. So, I mean, it is what it is. That's just how they do it. But this is a big pickup, as I said, ranks as a top 100 player on the board, caliber player on the Irish Breakdown board. Mark Zackery's junior year, he was the star player for the Ben Davis team that won a state championship, Finished the season on defense with 39 tackles, 4 interceptions, 8 pass breakups, 3 forced fumbles, 3 fumble recoveries, 2 forced fumbles, and also caught 53 passes for 823 yards and 8 touchdowns as a wide receiver. Kid makes a ton of plays, and as I said, was also starting cornerback or point guard for their basketball team, averaged over 10 points a game the year that they won a state championship. So this is a very, very talented player. Actually, this year they were state runners-up this past year in basketball, and he averaged over 11 points a game. They won a championship the year before, I believe. This is a young man that has a very impressive scholarship, a group of scholarship lists. Obviously, his Final Four was the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, Michigan, Florida, and Cincinnati. He also had offers from Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, USC, Oregon, Penn State, Tennessee, Texas A&M, Wisconsin, Iowa, Louisville, Michigan State, Duke, Indiana, Cincinnati, West Virginia, Minnesota, Vanderbilt, and Northwestern. So you can see this is a very, very impressive profile for Notre Dame. And you guys see what I'm rocking today, right? I'm rocking the gap closer shirt today because, Mark Zackery and this cornerback class as a whole, put them all together. No doubt about it, this is a gap closing group. And that's saying something when you consider how well Notre Dame has recruited the cornerback position in recent seasons. And you can make a case that this is sort of something that kind of keeps the gap from not widening in regard to people will say, hey, look, Notre Dame had an elite secondary last year. And that's true. And they may have an elite secondary again in 2024. But the gap that I'm referring to is like the truly elite teams who tend to do it year after year after year after year. And what Notre Dame has put themselves in position to do with recent recruiting at cornerback and absolutely with this 2025 cornerback class, which is now capped off with Mark Zackery, is to keep that going. That's how you close the gap. Not to have a year or two where you were really good. Notre Dame's had that in the past. 2018, they were outstanding at cornerback. But can you become that cornerback factory where at this position you're closing the gap on those teams, and it's just the way it is. It's just a new reality year after year after year, and Mike Mickens is certainly doing that, and Mark Zackery is a big part of making that happen. So let's dive into a little bit of the backstory. This is going to be one that doesn't have a lot of intrigue, to be completely honest with you. Sometimes kids commit, and we'll give you hey man, you just got to tell you this really interesting story about this one. This is one that's been Notre Dame's recruitment for a long time. You go back to, they offered him last May. They had been recruiting him for a little bit of a little while going into that. Mike Mickens was on him very early. Was no matter who they went after. Dallas Golden was another kid they went after early. Cree Thomas is a guy they went after. They offered all these big time national cornerbacks, and it never. Anytime you talk to somebody at Notre Dame, anytime you talk to sources that are close to who are they recruiting at corner, Mark Zackery's name, Dallas Golden's name, Cree Thomas, those were always guys that were near the top of the board. And Mark Zackery in particular was a guy that I was told that the Notre Dame defensive coaches, especially Mike Mickens, were very high on. They love his competitiveness. They loved his athleticism. They loved his football IQ. So all those things they loved, and the fact that he was an in-state kid made it even more important that they get him. And honestly, for a long time, Notre Dame's been kind of the team to beat. Michigan made a hard run at him. Ohio State made a hard run at him. They backed off once they got Devin Sanchez and Naeem Offord and some of those guys. But before those things happened, Ohio State made a hard push for him as well. I would argue that Ohio State's probably the only team from the intel that I had that might have had a shot to beat Notre Dame if they would have stayed in it with him. And he mentioned in the interview today that he grew up an Ohio State fan, but even before Ohio State filled up, Notre Dame was really pulling ahead. And as Mark said during his announcement of his commitment, that it was Notre Dame for a while. And that's not a surprise. And so he's actually been committed to Notre Dame privately for several weeks now. So he committed to Notre Dame pretty soon after Dallas Golden committed to Notre Dame, because at that point in time, there's one spot left. And Mark was not going to miss it. And so he had gone on a lot of visits, and he was ready to make that decision, and he made the decision, and now Notre Dame has him. So, I mean, there's not a lot of intrigue to that backstory, right? This is just one of those ones that Notre Dame was in a great place, and they got it done. And it's almost kind of like it wasn't that long ago you didn't know if Notre Dame could get top corners, and now you see a top 100 kid from in-state, and you're like, yeah, Mickens is going to get that one done. And that's pretty much what they did. They were able to get that one done. So that's the backstory to Mark Zackery picking Notre Dame. Now let's dive into the class impact. So big picture, coming into this cycle, Notre Dame was in a very unique position at cornerback because several things were kind of going on, and it's evolved a little bit as we've gone through the cycle. Notre Dame, starting back in really 2022 with the class of Benjamin Morrison and Jaden Mickey, has really recruited the cornerback position at a high level. 23 class was followed up by Christian Gray and Micah Bell. The 24 class followed that up with Leonard Moore and Carson Hobbs. And then you come into 2025, and it was really about the ultimate stacking classes on top of each other. The success they had in recent seasons allowed this coaching staff to focus more and more and more on talent, as opposed to numbers. And so there was really this focus early on finding the kids that they thought had the really high ceilings, whether it be a lower ranked kid like a Cree Thomas that they think if he pans out could be really, really good, or the guys that are just really good right now, like the Dallas Goldens. And then Mark Zackery kind of developed into that more so as a junior. Notre Dame liked Mark Zackery a lot early on from what I'm told, but his junior year really solidified that. He had a great breakout season. I had him as more of a top 150-ish type of guy before his junior season, and after his junior season, and I did my full evaluation, it was very clear that this was a top 100 caliber player. Graded him out, and that's exactly the range that he fell into, was that top 100 category. So, but he was a guy that Notre Dame was on really from the beginning. So you had to focus on talent, and they were also looking for guys obviously fit what they're trying to do. They're really trying to continue the evolution to being a team that can play a lot of man coverage. They were really trying to emphasize Mike Mickens really wants guys with high-level football IQs, competitive guys, but also players that are instinctive football players. Being smart is imperative to playing cornerback in this defense. And I don't mean smart like book smart. I mean football smart. That's a very, very important. And Benjamin Morrison grades out at a very high level in that regard. Christian Gray does that as well. That's one of the things I loved about Leonard Moore. And so you look at the 2025 class, and you say, okay, this is clearly one of those kids that fits all the profiles that Mike Mickens likes. He's a little on the thin side, but he's long, he's strong for his size, and there's just the all-around game was very strong. So he fit that, looking for impact talent. Well, then as the defense starts to evolve, and Notre Dame is going into more of a sub-package type of defense, meaning a team that's going to be using the nickel more and more and more. And then you start to have the transition after the regular season into Mike Mickens taking over the entire secondary. There was an even greater push at that time for numbers. So Notre Dame was good with 2 early on. 2 was the minimum number. Just keep stacking twos. But once Mike Mickens got promoted to the secondary coach, the transition went more to, hey, we need to get a third. And for a while there was even talk about, we'll bring in 4 if it's the right 4. Well, now we can talk about this. That was more about they weren't going to turn down some corners to get to 3. But if Dallas Golden would have gone through with his original plan of going through the summer, they were going to take out Dallas Golden no matter what. So that would have been the thing that got them to 4. Dallas Golden makes his decision, and now there's 1 spot left, and Mark Zackery became the pick. And the reason why the transition happened to where they liked the notion of bringing 3 and wanted 3 and then went into needing 3 was a desire to have a more of an ability as a defense to play 3 corners against certain teams. So when you look at the Ohio State game, for example, and you think about the matchups that really allowed Ohio State to have the game-changing plays to beat Notre Dame, it was a 4th and 7 throw to Julian Fleming against the nickel, who's more of a safety type of body and player in Thomas Harper. It was a seam route right down the left seam where they got, by the hook curl nickel and then attacked to safety. And Notre Dame got into a situation where they said, look, more and more we need to be able to transition to being a team that can put 3 corners on the field that can play the run, but can also cover. We have to have that ability. When you go play Texas and Steve Sarkisian, you need that ability. You look back at 2020 when Notre Dame played that Alabama defense, they would have needed that in that look. You look at 2022 and 23 and what Georgia's offense has evolved to, where they'll put 3 receivers on the field more often. They'll put a guy like that Lad McConkey in the slot. The need to have a pure cover player, more pure cover players on the roster was important. And being able to bring in a 3rd corner in this class was going to kind of push them over the top numbers-wise to be able to have that. And then, of course, once Micah Bell left the team, it became even more important that they solidify those numbers. And Notre Dame was able to do that. So when you look at Mark Zackery and you ask yourself, okay, well, how does Mark Zackery fit into all this? Well, he literally checks every box. Okay, what do we know that Mike Mickens likes? Okay, we know he likes guys that can play man. Check. We know he likes guys that are competitive. Check. We know he likes length. Check. Mark Zackery's 5'11". I've seen him listed between 5'11 and 6 foot, but he's long, very long arms. He plays bigger than, 5'11", 6 foot. So he checks that box. He likes smart football players. Check. He likes guys that can be impact players that can do damage beyond just coverage. You look at Mark Zackery, checks that box. He likes guys that have, as I mentioned, high football IQs. Check. He fits a need where he can play either inside or outside, either outside spot in the defense. So that's a check as well. And he likes guys that that have some versatility, some guys that can do different things. Zachary's a check there also. And so when you look at him, and then also, does he have impact potential? Check. So does he meet the numbers need? Check. So this is a young man that really checked all the boxes for Notre Dame. And it was very clear that getting him was going to give you the kind of impact class that you're going to have. And as I said, this is the player. I mean, it's really fascinating when you look at this cornerback class, because this is the player that sort of solidifies things. But it's been like, we kind of have felt for a while that this was going to be the cornerback class, right? With Dallas Golden, Cree Thomas committed in November, but then of course with Dallas and Mark, because Notre Dame did such a great job of putting themselves in that pole position with these players that we're just sitting there like, yeah, okay, they did what we thought they were going to do. Doesn't take away from how important it is. So we talked about Notre Dame met their numbers needs in the class. They met their desire to improve the talent with this class at cornerback, Mark Zackery being a big part of that. And then they also had to bring in a group of players that could fit together. And I'm going to talk a little bit about more about that later, but just it's important to discuss for this section. You've got a guy like Cree Thomas that can play field or boundary. How he develops in his career is going to determine that. Right now, I personally would probably project Cree as more of a field type of player based on how he plays now, because he does play so much safety. There's a lot he would have to learn in order to be in hey, I'm going to play the boundary and do all the things that Benjamin Morris needs to do. Maybe down the road he could get there, but right now he projects there. So then the question is, well, could any other corners play boundary? Well, Dallas Golden could play boundary, and so can Mark Zackery, in my opinion. Now, he'll need to get a little bit stronger, but he's, again, junior in high school still. He'll get there. His functional strength is really good for a kid his size, and so he reminds me a lot of Benjamin Morrison in that regard. So I think he'll be able to play that position as well. And then you say, okay, well, you're adding three corners because you want to be able to play together more. Can you play nickel? I think Mark can play nickel, but I really prefer him as an outside guy. So I like Cree as an outside guy. I like Dallas as an outside guy, and I like Mark as an outside guy. Well, now that you've got Mark in the class, you're now free to be able to be more open to where you're going to play Dallas Golden. Dallas could obviously play outside, and if that's the fastest way to get on the field, then great. But now that you're here, now you're here with Mark, your outside numbers are in great position. Now you can look at one of those two guys moving inside, and my expectation would be that Dallas Golden would be the one that would do that initially. So now that you have Mark Zackery, you feel a lot better about the potential of moving a guy like Dallas Golden inside, and you say, okay, well, great, you got three corners, but can they play together? And as I just laid out, absolutely. I think Cree Thomas's best position is right here. I think Mark Zackery fits at both of them at a pretty high level, and then of course Dallas is the same way. So this is not just a group of three talented players. This is a group of three talented players that you can play together. And that was a huge, huge part of this for Notre Dame. So the class impact aspect of this for Notre Dame is huge in that regard. And I'll say this is where I also think he impacts the class. And this is more so, this isn't as much about the direct impact of his position or skill set, but Notre Dame has just not had a lot of success with Indianapolis players over the years. And they definitely haven't had a ton of success with Indianapolis skill players. They've tried to get some guys, and there just haven't been a lot of guys that were either great fits or guys that liked other schools. Ohio State's really made great inroads in Indianapolis. They're really the top school right now in Indianapolis. I mean, Mark Zackery's even said it. They were his top, they were his favorite school growing up. And when you think about how old these kids are, I mean, the last time Ohio State won a championship back in 2014, most of these kids were just coming into the age where they were following football. And so as Ohio State went on that great run from really 13, because they were an Orange Bowl team the year before, to now, that was the formative period for a lot of those kids around the country, but also in Indianapolis. In Ohio State, Columbus is just about as far from Notre Dame or from Indianapolis as South Bend is. And so there's a regional aspect to it as well. So Notre Dame's going to have to be able to find ways to get into Indianapolis and have success. So when you can go into the state or the city and you're Notre Dame and a kid's got an Ohio State offer and you look at their ability to go down there and get him, this is a kid from the best school in Indianapolis right now. Ben Davis, obviously, said state champs last year, top basketball program. This is a kid everybody in Indianapolis knows. They're very familiar with who Mark Zackery is and what he can do. And that gives this a huge pickup for Notre Dame. That, how will it impact future classes? We'll find out. But this is certainly a big step towards that. So I don't think that can be dismissed either. You went to Indianapolis. Mark Zachary's got. I was told. I don't know if this is true or not, but I was told he's got a if not like very close to a 4.0 GPA if he doesn't have a 4.0 GPA. So this is a kid that really just checked all the boxes. You had to get this one done. And Notre Dame made it look a lot easier than I think it actually is, if I'm being honest with you on that. The way that they recruited him was really well done, but this isn't normally a natural fit. They had to do a great job. I mean, Ohio State, the school he grew up on, recruited him for a while. And as I said, even before they filled up, Notre Dame had put themselves in pole position with Mark Zackery. Michigan made a hard run at him, and Steve Clinkscale really did a nice job with him in the recruiting process. He leaves for the Chargers, but even before he left for the Chargers, Notre Dame had put themselves in a great position with Mark Zackery. So going down to Indy and getting that done is really the final piece to what makes this such a big impact pickup for this class. So we've talked about the class impact. We've talked about the backstory, and I think it's time to watch a little bit of film. What do you guys think? And I'm going to show you guys on film. We're going to watch highlights because we watch highlights when we're doing this type of breakdown. But if you have a chance to watch him play live, or if you can find one of his games online, and there are some, this is a kid you're going to want to watch online because as good as these highlights are, they really don't do justice to how good of a player that Mark Zackery is. And he's one of those guys that's really grown on me over the last year. So let's begin with a film breakdown look at Mark Zackery. And as you guys will see, the way that they play him, he's going to end up at times being the boundary, at times being the field. And the first clip, and we've broken this down a little bit before, but the first clip is you see the intelligence. You see a kid that reads this route perfectly. The receiver threatens him, but he's reading the eye. He's feeling the receiver and reading the eyes of the quarterback. The quarterback sets up. He sees that guy plant, so he's reading the drop. So the quarterback gets the ball, does a quick drop. As soon as he comes out of that play fake, he's planting and throwing. Mark Zackery drives on it, and then boom, picks it off, takes it back to the house. That's a very, very high football IQ play. Yes, you need to be athletic to make that happen, but good athletes aren't going to make this play if you're not making that read. I think you can also see from this clip how long this young man is and the ability he has there. And he covers a lot of ground, which is partly where his ability – you're going to see a lot of these plays where he drives downhill, and you're going to see a lot of plays where he shows this kind of range. That's a big reason. Now, play number one, where's he playing? Boundary. Play number two, where's he playing? He's playing to the field. Now you're going to see where he can play from a field standpoint, and now you're going to see the range that he can cover from that position. They play a lot of off man at times at Ben Davis, but he also plays a lot of press man as well, and that ability to mix it up is big for Notre Dame because they will have their field corner do a lot of different things from a coverage standpoint. He doesn't just line up and play man coverage all the time like the boundary does, and that's where you could see Mark fitting into the field position as well. But look at that length. He's reading it. He's playing. This is a deep third right coverage. Actually, this looks like more like quarters. But he's playing back, reads the quarterback's eyes. They're trying to run a corner route here, smash corner concept. He reads it perfectly, reads the quarterback's eyes, gets up underneath it, and then boom, picks it off. He's a very smart football player, and then you're going to see him do some damage with it. Because as you'll see on offense, he can do some things with the football in his hands as well. He's a very dynamic player. This is a boundary throw, and you see how again, he's a smooth athlete, quick feet, but watch him read this quarterback. So by playing off, and this is sort of the dilemma that I think Mark Zackery puts Notre Dame in as a position, as a staff, because you're going to see some really good press man stuff, but he's so good at driving on things in front of him and getting his hands on the football in plays like this one right here that you're almost kind of like, man, I like him to the boundary, but man, I think this kid could be a good field cornerback as well. And it's because of stuff like this. You're going to allow to the field corner can keep things in front of him more. Mark does a great job here keeping this in front of him, nice, smooth, and it's not really a pedal, it's more of that side hop, but he just reads it, reads the quarterback's eyes, and jumps it. Pressure gets onto the quarterback. Quarterback gets away from it, and he's just got to step in front of it, and it makes it look easy. Very easy interception there from him. And you see the things that you can understand why Notre Dame is so high on him and what he can bring to the table. He's a very talented player. It's another example of him just keeping his eyes down the field, feeling out the receiver while also watching down the field. You can see that he has a very good spatial awareness for a cornerback, which is huge for a guy. You need that to be able to be an impact guy on the football. Absolutely need that to be an impact guy on the football. And you see Mark Zackery does that a lot. Very impactful player. Drives on that crosser, right? He's driving on the crosser. This looks like man, but then he sees the quarterback run, redirects, comes down, and strips the ball and takes the ball. So again, guy that's doing his job, but also has the awareness of what's going on around him to come and make a play on a guy that is really not his responsibility. More off-man coverage. You see the easy pedal, and then you watch him kind of turn his hips here. We don't see like a ton of just pure transitions on sophomore film from him. But again, I want to see him clean up that top end a little bit. He gets a little bit choppy at the top end. That's a technical thing that he can work through, and he'll be able to work through relatively easily. There's clips where he doesn't do that. And then you see him driving the ball, and you watch him. He drives appropriately. He drives that upfield shoulder. And the thing I like about Mark is he doesn't get super grabby in the games that I've seen. He's not a guy that he trusts himself and trusts his technique a lot more than young corners do. He's a guy that can really come up and get his hands on you without being grabby. And that's huge, huge. He just seems to always be around the ball. You know, here's a press clip situation. Reads it, right? They're trying to get him to come down. What they're trying to do here is they're trying to get him to bite downhill on the inside crack block, and then they're going to throw a slip screen outside of it. Mark does a nice job of recognizing it, just a touch late recognizing it, but he figures it out, gets outside. He's got to go outside this offensive lineman. If he gets sucked inside, this play's going outside, and they're going to get a big gain. He has to go outside and be the force player. He does that, but he gets past the lineman so easily that he's able to bend back in and make this play. So it's a smart football play, but it also shows his talent and ability by being able to get outside and get to the football and make that play, because they had it set up relatively nicely. See this nice backside hustle allows him to get to that football and recover the fumble. That was, I believe, against IMG. I believe, because I believe Ben Davis played IMG this past year. Red zone man situation. You can see he's got smooth hips and he's got easy change of direction, but there are some technical things as you'd expect from a junior cornerback to work out. But look at the feel he has for this, right? Look at him whip his head around, finds the receiver, right? Gets back through the blind spot, back to the receiver, reads the route, and then he goes from looking inside, flipping completely around, to then finding the receiver all the way back to finding the football. That is a heck of a play right there. And I don't care who you're playing against. That's something that says more about him than anything he's playing against. That intelligence to be able to read that kind of play, get back around, find the football, and get his hands on it is a really impressive play by Zachary there. Zachary understands too when you watch him play. He knows he's not a really big guy, and so he's become a very good form tackler. And you see that really the last 2 years. He does a nice job of going low on that play. But even though he's a skinnier guy, he does have pretty good functional play strength. You see a little bit of a tight transition here. Again, this is more of a technical thing. It's not a lack of physicality thing. This is him against IMG again. That little bit late, but he does a nice job finding the receiver, getting caught up and getting on him and playing him well. Good job reading the screen, blowing that up. I believe this is the state championship game, maybe the semifinal game. I'm not sure. Indiana people, you can tell me, do they only play the state championship in Indianapolis, or do they play both at the Colts Stadium? I wasn't sure about that one. At the very least, it's the state semifinal game. I believe this is the state championship game. Nice open field tackle. Does a nice job recognizing this, not allowing himself to get blocked by the receiver. Comes up and wins tackle. Says it's just state, so that would be the state championship game. Nice easy footwork. This is against Warren Central, I believe. Sees the post route, plays it well, stays over top, doesn't undercut it, stays over top, does a really nice job. Decent block destruction here. He'll need to get stronger to be a little bit better about that, but he doesn't allow himself to get pushed down the field, and that allows him to get off that play and come off and make the tackle. Another good cover play here. Does a nice job of feeling this route out. Now, this is where receivers can get grabby, is when the guy will break off a play like this. So, this looks like the receiver's breaking the route off. This is also similar technique to what'll happen if you're running like a burst corner, for example. But he does a nice job of staying over top, right? Reads the route. The guy goes out. He doesn't get grabby. He puts his hands on him because you need to get hands on, but he doesn't get grabby. Stays underneath the guy, does perfect position because you want to stay over top on the post, but then once he goes to that corner, then you want to stay underneath. So a really perfect transition by Mark Zackery, stays underneath it, gets his eyes back and finds the football. His ability to find the football in vertical coverage is really impressive. And we've seen Notre Dame have juniors and seniors that can't do that and make those kind of plays. There's another play where he goes low, makes the tackle. Another off-man play. Really, look how, this may not look like much to you guys, but when I see this, I look at a kid that's got very smooth feet, very quick feet, drives down very well, nice open field tackle. Again, in Notre Dame, he's going to have to get stronger in order to make those plays against college receivers. But that'll come. That'll come. Very competitiveness. You see good functional strength here. Doesn't allow this guy. This guy's basically just trying to push him off in order to get separation on a quick post inside in the red zone. And Mark battles him, doesn't let him get it, doesn't let him do it, and he stays on him and forces the incomplete pass. Comes downhill. Corners don't come downhill like this if they're afraid to hit. You're just, I don't care who you are. You're high school, JV, whatever. Corners that don't like to hit or afraid to hit don't come downhill the way that he comes downhill. I want to see him wrap up a little bit more. The form tackle aspect of this wasn't great, but he does play with a good angle, comes downhill aggressively and goes low. So even though he doesn't necessarily have the proper wrap up on that one, he's able to make the play because he comes up aggressively, doesn't let that running back get too much momentum, and is able to go out and make the play and get him down. Now, this is where you're just going to have some fun with him. This is where you're going to see the athleticism, guys. This is him playing wide receiver, and this isn't one that's necessarily going to say, hey, look, this is how it translates to the next level. I don't really care so much about his technique. But what you see from him playing wide receiver is you see the kid can run. You see a kid with very good feet. And you see a young man with just really excellent ball skills. He tracks the ball so well. So when you watch the defense, right? We just got done watching defense. And you look at a kid that you're like, man, he finds the ball really well. Well, this is part of it. This helps him because he plays wide receiver, and he's a very good wide receiver. So it's something that's going to help him be able to be an effective, player of the football because he's used to flipping his head around and accelerating through contact or accelerating through the look back, finding the football, and then getting his hands on. So those things help Mark a ton as a cornerback. Him being a really good receiver makes him a better cornerback. And that's why I always encourage young men, if you're going to play football, and you play both ways, absolutely play both ways. He understands routes. He understands what receivers do to get open. And those things all allow him to be a more effective player on the defensive side of the ball. But you can see he's just such a natural football player. And when you listen to him talk, He's not a really boisterous young man. He's not a real, in your face type of guy. He's very mild mannered, but and he's not even a super. Did he rule that out of bounds? Wow, he ruled that. Okay, I have to see that one a little bit up close. But you see a kid but when he's on the field, he's not. I mean, he'll talk a little bit, and you see like this play here. He shows like, hey, look what I did. But he's not like a super look at me kind of guy. He's just out there doing his job and just playing football. I mean, he's the kind of kid that you really like and that fits in really well to a place like Notre Dame. You want a guy that's confident, but you don't necessarily always need a guy that wants to make it all about him. Kid makes a ton of plays, a ton of plays. I mean, you think about this from the last two corners they've landed, Dallas Golden and Mark Zackery. I mean, honestly, guys, these kids could play offense for Notre Dame, legitimately play offense for Notre Dame. That's the kind of athletes they are. I mean, I said this before, Dallas Golden would be Notre Dame's highest ranked receiver right now. I probably wouldn't have Mark Zackery as their highest ranked receiver, but he'd be number two. And he certainly has more proven production than Elijah Burris. But he's a kid that to me is another one that could play offense at the next level. I like him better on defense. Same thing with Dallas Golden, but these are legit offensive football players. Look at that burst. You got receivers on the Notre Dame team that don't get off the line with that kind of urgency. This when you guys hear me talk about urgency, this is urgency. He's trying to eat up that cushion of that corner as fast as possible. Takes it down the field, guys all over him, tracks it perfectly. Guy gets his hands around on him, doesn't matter. He keeps the football, hangs on the football, and it's a big play for Ben Davis. You love the play strength for his size at his age is really impressive. It really is. Look at that cover 2 hole throw. That's a really nice catch. Boom. Really nice catch. You can see the acceleration when you watch him on offense. You can see the acceleration, the things that will be more prominent from him on defense once he starts improving his technique a little bit. I mean, he just runs. This is Warren Central, who puts Division I and 1AA kids out every year, and he just runs by this kid. Ball's back shoulder, relatively well thrown. Mark does a good job of recognizing it, flips his hips, and makes the catch. And he didn't actually play it well initially, and you saw him stumble, but he does a great job of focusing on it, getting his hips around, and locking in the football, even through that little slight stumble. Real good quickness on that out and up concept here. Nice catch. Very, very good ball skills. This kid's a good football player. You also can see the length in a lot of these clips too. Nice job fighting for the ball backside. Again, another play. I believe that's also Warren Central. It's a really talented player. So I'm just going to let you guys enjoy and watch these last few clips of Mark Zackery. And this is from the state title game and just the type of talented football player that he is. And then we'll talk a little bit about what's next. That's a heck of a catch. He's about his 4th 2-hole throw catch? That takes some guts because you don't always know where that safety is going to be, and he's going to come over with some bad intentions a lot of the time. Notice he catches the ball with his hands all the time. He's not at all a body catcher. Good job finding that zone, flips his hips, makes that look easy. It's a really good football player. I know we're not supposed to have dead air, but sometimes it's just fun to watch a kid play. And we're doing that as we wrap this up. We're getting close to the end of his highlights here. Last couple plays, I believe, right here. Nice job getting both feet in. That was 4th down. You guys see that? That was a 4th down play. That's the first time I noticed that when I've watched this. Because when I watch this offensive film, I'm just looking at the athleticism. I'm not thinking situational football. That's a fourth down conversion in the state championship game. Gets that route, wins that route, gets both feet down. It's a heck of a play. There are things that obviously are going to translate to playing defense, and his competitiveness when the ball's in the air is definitely one that's going to translate to that. I love that play. And that is, folks, Mark Zackery. So we talked a little bit about the backstory. We've talked about the class impact. We broke down a little bit of film. Let's just talk a little bit about what's next. And so we'll look at this from two different angles. Number one is obviously secondary. And you've now got one coach recruiting the entire secondary. That's Mike Mickens. Your corner class is now complete. You've got your three corners. That's where they're going to be right now. You've got the kids that you really targeted early. These are the young men that they targeted early and really wanted. And you know what I'm going to do actually while I'm having this conversation? So I know some of you had said you wanted to watch some basketball highlights of him. So what I'm going to do while I'm talking about sort of a little bit of this what's next is I'll put some basketball clips on. So how about that? You guys can watch some basketball clips while we're talking a little bit about what's next and moving on to the final segment, which is the breaking down the entire cornerback section. So let me get those up. Got to get these ads. All right, so let you guys watch those hoops highlights while I get to talking about the rest of this. So we did the backstory. We did the class impact. We watched some film. We're going to talk now about what's next. And what's next at cornerback is Notre Dame is done in the 2025 class. They landed 3 very talented players. They also landed 3 guys that they wanted. They landed 3 guys that were top of the board, guys that they've been on for a long time. You know, if you were to talk about any kind of dream class for Notre Dame at cornerback, it's going to include the kids that they now have in the class. So cornerback, they're done. But you've also got Mike Mickens as the cornerbacks coach. He was the cornerbacks coach. He's now the secondary coach. So he's also recruiting safety position. So you've got a great elite corner class now. You also have a very good safety class. You know, love Ivan Taylor. He's a top 50 caliber-ish player. I have him just outside that top 50 grade range. He's just outside of that. Easy top 100 player. And Ethan Long, who's a top 250 caliber player. So you've got a good safety class, great corner class. So now the question is, can Notre Dame land what is needed to have an elite, a truly elite type of secondary class as a whole? And right now, as it stands now, with the 5 kids they have, this is going to be one of the 3 or 4 best secondary classes in the country, in my opinion. I have a hard time, and it could end up maybe falling a little bit because of what other people do, but I'm just looking at it historically, what teams normally sign. I have a hard time believing there's going to be more than 3 or 4 or 5 teams that are going to have a better cornerback class or secondary class than this. And so when you look at what can make it to really, it really takes that big jump. It really becomes that number one type of elite gap closing, gap erasing type of class. The generational, whether you want to do whatever hype, it's somewhat hyperbolic, but at the same time, I really believe that this is truly could be a historical Notre Dame recruiting class in the secondary. And it's really going to come down to what they do at safety. So if they go out, there's 2 kids on the board. There's Jameer Joseph and there's Jadon Blair. If they get Jameer Joseph, that's a really good safety class. And this is going to make this one of the 2 or 3 best secondary classes in the country, in my opinion. I have Jameer Joseph as a top 200 to 250 caliber player. It would literally give Notre Dame 6 kids that I would evaluate as top 250 caliber players. Okay, that's kind of where I see it. However, there is a player left on the board that if you can get him instead, gives you a truly elite best secondary class in the country, something you haven't done in 20, 30 years at least, and something that can dramatically change the future of your program if you're able to get it done and then coach it up. And I think the one thing we can all agree on is the coaching in the secondary in recent seasons has been outstanding. You've got to go out and improve the talent. And they certainly have done that at corner. Ivan Taylor and Ethan Long certainly moves the needle more at safety. But and so does Jameer Joseph. I mean, Jameer Joseph is a good football player. But let's be honest, Jadon Blair is a top 50 caliber player. Jadon Blair is a special type of player. You get him and Ivan Taylor in the class. There's nobody in the country, in my opinion, is going to have a better safety class than that. Then you throw in Ethan Long, who was recruited by Michigan and several other top programs, and you're talking about your safety class could then rival your corner class. And that doesn't happen very often, even at the big-time schools. And that's what's in front of Notre Dame right now, is that opportunity to go out and get themselves a truly gap-erasing type of class. They've done very well. They've closed the gap enormously in recent seasons at cornerback. There's no question about that. Safety, it's been a little up and down, but you did get Bronte Johnson last year. You got Kennedy Urlacher last year, Tabron Benny Powell. That's how I rank those three. Then you come out and get Ivan Taylor the next year after that. So you've had a 3-year stretch where you've landed a Don Schuler, Luke Talich, Ben Minnick, Bronte Johnson, Kennedy Urlacher, Tabron Benny Powell, Ivan Taylor, and Ethan Long. You've certainly closed the gap from where you were from a consistency standpoint. You've had some stars, but you haven't had consistency recruiting that position. But you go out and get a guy like Jadon Blair with Ivan Taylor, and all of a sudden the gap is gone. A year after getting Bronte Johnson, the gap is gone. It's absolutely gone. And now you're talking about Notre Dame being in a position just like that, just in a couple short recruiting cycles of going out there and putting together a truly special secondary class that normally we think about teams like Georgia and Bama putting together. And Notre Dame has a chance to do that. How they close is going to determine that. And if they close with Jadon Blair, they have absolutely done that. If they close with Jameer Joseph, guess what? That's also a group of players that is a gap closing class. But my opinion and my belief is that Jadon Blair added with this group is gap eraser. Nobody can touch you in this particular cycle, in my opinion. It would be very, very hard for anybody to have a class as good as Notre Dame's. That's what they have a chance to do. And to be talking about that with this from the secondary standpoint at Notre Dame is exceptional. It speaks volumes about obviously what Marcus Freeman and Chad Bowden bring to the table, but it also speaks volumes about what Mike Mickens has done since he got here. And you're doing it now 4 years in a row. You're now stacking those classes back to back to back to back. There's no argument anymore. Mike Mickens is an elite recruiter. He's already proven himself to be an elite coach. He's an elite recruiter. And this just further shows that. And getting that in-state kid to go with what you have. And then to be able to convince a guy like here's the other thing too. There's two parts to this that you have to think about. It's not only, okay, can you convince the kid to come play for you? Well, sure. But can you convince a kid like Mark Zackery and Dallas Golden to come play for you when you've already recruited so well in the years before? And then you get Cree and you get Dallas, and you still have to be able to convince Mark Zackery to be part of that class. And they did it with, again, it looked with ease, and it shouldn't have been easy. And they were able to do that. And it just speaks volumes about what this staff is doing right now in recruiting certain positions. And the secondary certainly is part of that. And if they can cap it all off with Jadon Blair on July 5th, that is big time. That is special recruiting right there. But cornerback recruiting is done in 2025. But folks, it is not done. As you all know, all that means right now is it's time for Mike Mickens to turn his attention on finishing the safety class, which is now down to 2. And now it's time to look forward to the 2026 class. And so there's 5 names we're going to go over today that we're going to talk about. This board is going to evolve, right? So this is sort of a initial get to know these guys type of players. This is not a situation where I want you guys to think that we're talking about this is the only 5 they're going to get. This is all they're going to look at. They're going to have to pick from these type of players. No, this is the early board. Now, if they get some players from that board, then obviously that means that Notre Dame was able to go out there and recruit at an elite level once again and land top players. So, but what we're going to kind of focus on right now is really looking at sort of what the early board looks like in regard to the top prospects that Notre Dame is after at cornerback in this class. And, again, I'm going to go over 5 players. These are guys that right now, based on my understanding of where things stand with Notre Dame, are guys that they believe they have a shot at right now. And also are guys that are top of the board type of players with Notre Dame. And that's kind of where we're going to be at. So the first few that we're going to talk about, I'm going to talk about obviously RJ Sermons. is a player that Notre Dame has looked at. I'm going to save obviously my favorite player in the class for later. But R.J. Sermons is a young man from Rancho Cucamonga in California. Notre Dame offered him back in, I believe they offered him during the Pot of Gold rush that they had a while ago. He's a guy that also visited campus this summer. So R.J. Sermons is a player from California that you're going to want to get to know. He's a taller cornerback. Listed at 6 foot tall by On3. He's listed at 6'1" by Rivals. So this is a guy that has a lot of length. He is ranked as a top 50 player by ESPN and On3, and a top 60 player by 247 Sports, and has a very, very impressive offer list. He is going to be a young man that you're going to want to get to know. Another player to get to know is Samari Matthews. This is a young man from North Carolina that was recently offered by Notre Dame, and is a guy to keep an eye on from Cornelius, North Carolina. Has talked about getting a visit from Notre Dame. He's really kind of starting to blow up a little bit with offers. He's a guy that is a highly ranked player as well. He's one of those sort of, okay, this is the best of the best type of player from a ranking standpoint. He's a guy that's ranked number 17 overall by Rivals. They have him as the number 2 corner in the country. He's a consensus top 50 player from everyone else. Another young man with a very impressive offer list, Georgia, Miami, and obviously now Notre Dame as well. So Samari Matthews is another player that you're going to want to get to know as a top prospect on the board for Notre Dame. And this is not really in any particular order other than, my kind of early favorite guy is at the bottom. Here's another player that I do love a lot. I've actually seen a lot of this young man on film, and this is Jordan Thomas, who is a 2026 player from Bergen Catholic in New Jersey. Another guy that is a top 250 caliber player. I actually think his ranking profile is a little low right now. He is 135 by 247 Sports, 192 by ESPN, 222 from Rivals. And On3 has him as a 3-star. That's the outlier. I think this kid can really play and really do a lot for his program. Very athletic, very instinctive, makes a ton of plays. And obviously New Jersey is a place that Notre Dame's done very well. But of course, you also have to contend with Penn State, who's recruiting him pretty hard, and other programs that hit that state area, that area hard. So Jordan Thomas is another young man that to keep an eye on when you talk about the Notre Dame board for 2026. And there's also a young man from Ohio that's another highly ranked player that's been on campus in Notre Dame multiple times. That is Elbert Hill. Right now, most think that Ohio State is the leader there. But as I said, Notre Dame has gotten Elbert Hill on campus multiple times. He's a consensus top 100 player. A little bit on the smaller side. He's from out in the Akron area. But a guy that I know the Notre Dame staff likes a ton. He's been to Penn State and Ohio State more than he's been to Notre Dame. We did camp at Notre Dame last year. He was on campus again in March, and he's a guy that the Notre Dame staff is making a push for as well. So, you look at it again, R.J. Sermons from California, Samari Matthews from North Carolina, Jordan Thomas from New Jersey, and then Elbert Hill from the state of Ohio. The last guy on the board is a guy that you all know that I'm very high on. I've talked about him a ton. And he's, to me, one of the more underrated players in the country. And you guys know how sometimes I just watch a kid and I'm just like, man, that's my guy. Well, the guy that's on my list in 2026 is Joey O'Brien from LaSalle College in Pennsylvania. This is a very unique player. He's listed at 6'3", 6'4", and he's a corner. And he's the one kid that I do want to bring some film up. We're going to watch a little bit of Joey O'Brien because I want you guys to see what I see in him. His recruiting profile is starting to come around. On3 now has him ranked as a top 200, number 203 player. ESPN has at 166. Rivals hasn't ranked him yet, but 247 Sports actually has him as a top 100 player. They have him number 65. So props to them for actually getting one right. So he's a guy that I'm quite high on. I'm going to try and see if I can find his highlights here and let you guys kind of see what he can do. But there's a lot of Joey O'Briens out there, folks, and so I've got to be able to find the film. And let me see if I can find Joey's film. Here we go. This is it. So this is the sophomore film for Joey O'Brien, and give you guys a chance to watch him as we kind of finish wrapping him up. But you're talking about a 6'4" kid that I genuinely think can play corner. He's very smooth. He is a guy with some speed, as you're going to see. Very natural runner. Great catch radius. Great range. you're going to think Cam Hart when you watch him, but he's a little bit more smooth than Cam was. Cam was a little bit more explosive, but very similar ability to play. And if you remember, Cam was a receiver coming out of high school as well. But this is a kid that I think is just an elite football player. I really do. I think this is a top 50 caliber player. When I watch him, I see a guy that not only has really, really great size, very smooth, very fluid. You don't see 6'4" guys that can flip their hips and change direction with the ease that Joey O'Brien does. I mean, he's just such a smooth football player. It's very easy. The things he does are very easy. He's also a kid that has very good long speed, which you see at receiver. I mean, that right there is just the ability to recover and drive downhill is really effective there. Flips his hips relatively well on that particular play that you guys just saw. But the catch radius and as an offensive player, and then having to throw around him, he's the kind of guy that you can beat him by a step, and you still can't get the ball over him because he's so long and he plays the football so well. And he brings a lot to the table there. And he's a type of kid where if for some reason he can't play at corner, whether there's just guys ahead of him, you have a need somewhere else, you don't think he quite fits there, could easily go play safety or even wide receiver. I mean, this is one of those guys that you guys know I love. Those guys can play anywhere. He could play receiver for Notre Dame. He could play safety for Notre Dame, but I would absolutely give him every opportunity in the world to play corner at Notre Dame and develop in that way as well. So this is one of my favorite football players, not just favorite corners in this class, but one of my favorite overall players. And there's a lot of talented corners on the board. I mean, they've offered a lot of corners. These for me, based on the information I've been able to gather, as far as an early list are some of the names to know. There'll be others, and there's other guys that have been offered that I'm sure that Notre Dame is going to continue to try to get in with. But these are the 5 that I think they like a lot that also have some level of interest in Notre Dame. We'll see how things kind of develop moving forward. But I just wanted to let you guys see a little bit of the Joey O'Brien film just because you can at least get a little bit of a taste on why I like this kid so much as a football player. And I'm really hoping that Notre Dame can get him back on campus and continue to impress him and eventually get him in the class because I think he could be a really, really excellent player to build their class around. So that's where things stand right now for Notre Dame from the standpoint of what's next and what they're trying to do with this with the 2026 corner class. Because now you can focus on that because you're done in 2025 as you finish up that class. I want to wrap up this conversation. We do have some super chats that I will get to when we're done with this. So when I'm done with this section, don't go. But I just want to quickly discuss just how big what we're seeing is. And it's almost kind of like Mike Mickens has changed the narrative so quickly that for me, I'll speak for myself. And if some of you feel the same way, you can go ahead and tell me that you feel the same way also. That by the way, Jet Washington is more of like an athlete, safety, corner, receiver. He can play everywhere. So he's not a pure corner right now, according to the people that I've talked to. But when I look at the sort of this class that they're putting together, it's like the way that Mickens has changed the narrative, you almost kind of take it for granted a little bit. And I have at least sort of not forgotten. I definitely have forgotten, but I just assume that those days are behind us as long as Mike Mickens is here, where cornerback recruiting was really a struggle for Notre Dame. And you'd get like one guy and you'd be like, oh my gosh, they got this one player. Holy cow. And if you ever had like a back-to-back class, you were like, wow. Like, man, things are changing at Notre Dame, right? I mean, I remember back in 06 and 07 when in 06 they got Rayshawn McNeil and Darren Walls. I love Darren Walls, by the way. Rayshawn was a good player too, but I love Darren Walls. And then in 07, you got Gary Gray, who's a top 100 player. And you're thinking, man, like Notre Dame is recruiting corners now. What are they going to do? It had been 15 years or so since they've really done that. And then it became an issue again for a while. And there'd be some players here and there where they would do well. And they had some classes that turned out to be pretty good. Obviously, the 16 cornerback class was outstanding with Julian Love and Dante Vaughn and Troy Pride, of course. But it's just not a thing where they've done it consistently or they've been able to stack these type of classes back to back to back. And the ability to have now a 4th class in a row of just really outstanding cornerback recruiting it just speaks volumes to who Mike Mickens is and what he's been able to do to the program. And it also shows the importance of having a track record of development, because when Mike Mickens showed up in Notre Dame, he could point to Sauce Gardner and what he became. He could say, I played a big role, recruited the kid. I was the guy that pounded on the table for this guy. I'm the one that developed him as a freshman, turned him into a freshman All-American. And even though he didn't coach him the next couple of years, he laid that foundation. Same thing with Kobe Bryant, who went out and won a Jim Thorpe Award. And then you come to Notre Dame and you're able to have success with Nick McLeod and Clarence Lewis in that first year. And then you go out in 2021 and you help with the conversion of Cam Hart to cornerback. And then by 2022, by the end of 2022, your cornerback room is as good as anybody in the country. And then in 2023, it was really that way all season. And not only are you banking on your talented starters, which Notre Dame has had talented starters in the past. You go back to 2018, Notre Dame had one of the 4 or 5 best cornerback tandems in college football in Julian Love and Troy Pride. But the depth wasn't there. And then when those guys were gone, now because if you think about it, in 2020, when Notre Dame played Alabama in the semifinal, the 2 starting corners on that team were not on the roster the year before. Nick McLeod transferred in from NC State, and Clarence Lewis was a true freshman. And then you fast forward to a few years to 2023, and Clarence Lewis is barely playing at cornerback for Notre Dame. He had to move inside the slot, didn't even play a ton there. That's how quickly they changed things at Notre Dame. So 2020, playoff appearance. By 2 years later, the guy that started for you at cornerback, because in 2022, he ended up getting beat out pretty early in the year. Within 2 years, the kid that started for you as a true freshman at cornerback in the national semifinal game is a backup. And by his senior years, not playing a whole lot. Not because Clarence wasn't respected, not because he's not a good football player, not because there's any negativity. It's just they out-recruited him. They over-recruited him. And that's what great coaching staffs do. You may love a kid, but you go out that next year and you say, hey, look, we're going to try to take it to another level, because that's what great teams do. Love my class of Benjamin Morrison and Jaden Mickey. Let me try to go do it better the next year. Let me go try to do it better the next year after that. And the last 3 years, Benjamin Morrison and Jaden Mickey in 2022, Christian Gray, Micah Bell in 2023, Carson Hobbs and Leonard Moore in 2024, and now in 2025, you might have your best group yet. And that is just elite recruiting. And we're seeing something is for those of you that watched the show that Brian Smith and I had a couple weeks ago. You didn't see this at Notre Dame, even back in the Lou Holtz era, because back then Coach Holtz was taking quarterbacks and running backs and guys that played other positions, and a lot of them were turning into defensive backs. Not a lot of those guys were pure defensive backs coming out of high school. Now, the staff had that intention of it. But the ability to go out and do what they're doing, and now you're seeing legitimate interest from top corners around the country in the 26 class, you realize that Mike Mickens has completely changed the narrative and changed the game at Notre Dame. Things are so much different now with him as the cornerbacks coach and the primary recruiter. And then, of course, being backed up by Chad Bowden, who does a tremendous job in this area. Being backed up by Marcus Freeman, who does a good job. Being backed up by Al Golden, who's able to sell his overall big picture vision of what we're trying to do, what they're trying to do at Notre Dame is really huge. And to be able to do that without really having, and this is the most impressive part, not really having the NFL draft success at Notre Dame that often is needed to become a driver in this regard. Now, he has some draft success with Sauce Gardner, but, Cam Hart this past year was a 5th-round draft pick. But people see it. They know what he's doing. He's a very relatable recruiter. He's a very matter-of-fact guy. There's no BS. He's going to tell you what he believes and what he thinks. And then when kids get on campus, they talk to the current players, and they're like, hey, this is a guy that I want to play for. And it's been an incredibly fun journey to see. And I'll be honest with you, I liked the hire of Mike Mickens. I didn't know how good it was going to be. You always wonder, it's got a great track record. I remember reading about the freshman All-American or the freshman All-MAC kid he had at Bowling Green and Nick Johnson. Then he goes to Cincinnati, does a great job there. Like, hey, what's he going to do at Notre Dame? And you like him as a coach, but can he recruit at a place like Notre Dame? And then that first year, there was a little bit of an unknown because that first class he put together with obviously you had Ryan Barnes, you had Philip Riley, you had JoJo Johnson, and you had not Clarence Lewis. I'm drawing a complete blank on who the other cornerback was in that class, but it was Clarence Lewis. Sorry. And you look at it, or no, it's the 21 class. Who was the other cornerback in the 21 class? Why I'm drawing a complete blank here on who the other cornerback was in the 2021 class. Why am I drawing a blank on that? Give me a second, folks. I'm going to find this one here real quick because this is going to bother me because they signed 4 corners. I said JoJo Johnson. I said Philip Riley. I said Ryan Barnes, right? So let's see who the other cornerback was in that class. I can't believe you guys got to help me out here. I'm completely drawing a blank on who that – Chance Tucker. That's who it was. Chance Tucker. My guy, Chance Tucker. I can't believe I forgot about Chance. So Chance Tucker was the 4th corner in that class, and it was good. I mean, there's some upside. There's some talent. You know, I liked Ryan Barnes coming out. I thought Philip Riley as a slot could bring some value. JoJo was a really athletic kid that could do some things, and then Chance was a guy that I wasn't as high on, but he was just a playmaker, and you just felt he'd have a chance to do something in Notre Dame. And it didn't pan out. And part of the reason it didn't pan out is because they quickly out-recruited that class. But that recruiting class was put together in a unique situation because that's when the COVID-19 stuff happened, and you couldn't travel, you couldn't go see recruits, they couldn't come visit your campus. And so you're basically having to recruit an entire class from your office and from your home. And it was a very unique situation, a very interesting situation. And you're new at a school, and you're building these new relationships. And I still thought it had some good wins in that class. But as soon as he got on the road, you go out and you beat Nick Saban and Jimmy Lake for Benjamin Morrison. You go out and get Jaden Mickey out of California. You go out the next year and you beat LSU and Ohio State for Christian Gray, and you land Micah Bell, who had a very impressive offer list. Georgia made a run at the end of the deal. You go out and land Leonard Moore, who the Notre Dame staff wanted big time early on. You get Carson Hobbs, who you flipped from South Carolina, and then, of course, you come out in 2025 and do what he did. So to the success he's had has been I honestly, it's better than I could even have thought that was possible before he got here. And the thing that makes it even more exciting is you think about that fact that you know that these kids are going to come to Notre Dame and be coached and developed. And that's a huge, huge thing. So when you look at this particular class, you're talking about 2 top 100 players in Mark Zackery and Dallas Golden. Dallas Golden I have as a top 50 player. I have Cree as a top 150-ish player. You know, I think 2 to 250. I believe Rivals has him as a top 250 player. Others have him as a 3-star. You know, I think that 150 to 250 range is very fair, but that's your 3. In past years, he's your 1. And in a lot of years, you're ecstatic about getting Dallas Golden. You're ecstatic about getting Mark Zackery. Now you're getting all of them. And that's going to be the key. You're getting all of them. And this cornerback class has a chance to be a historic one for Notre Dame. We'll see how the rankings finish, but just from – I'm talking about like from nationally, but I'm talking about how I evaluate it. If these 3 kids continue to just stay on the path they're on, don't need big jumps, don't need something crazy, just stay on the path you're on, this is going to be Notre Dame's best cornerback class in over 30 years at least. And when you're able to put that together in a year where you're also recruiting safety at a high level, it really is impressive. And it's not a class that's an anomaly. That's the thing that I'm getting to. This is such an elite class of cornerbacks. 2 top 100 guys, one of them being a top 50 guy, borderline 5-star guy. You know, you've got length, you've got speed at spots, you've got cover ability. You've got dual sport guy. You've got a 2-way stars at multiple positions. You've got a great fit together. You know, whether you want to put Cree as the boundary and Mark as the field, some people like it that way. If you like Mark as the boundary, Cree as the field, you like it that way. You like Dallas in the slot. You like Dallas in the boundary, like Dallas in the field. And there's so many different ways that these kids can fit and match together on top of what you landed in the class before. And it certainly is an exciting day. And we thought that it was going to happen because Notre Dame's been such in a good position with Dallas Golden and Mark Zackery. But being a Notre Dame fan, you always kind of have that back of your mind. But something could go wrong. But in this case, it didn't because Mike Mickens and Chad Bowden and Marcus Freeman went out and got it done. And it's a good day. So that's my breakdown of Mark Zackery's commitment. We did have 4 super chats I want to get to and share with you guys. Number 1 from my guy, Zach Martin. Thank you, Zach, very much for that. Mike Mickens, 2024. Yeah, he's rolling, man. He's rolling. He's doing his thing. Iden Benami to super chat. Thank you, Iden. Bonus IB live show on Memorial Day weekend. What could be better? Let's go. Gap closing. Thank you, B, and God bless our veterans and active military members. Absolutely. I concur with everything that my man Iden just said. Jimmy Page with a super chat. Thank you, Jimmy. Is Jordan better in football or lacrosse? Insane talent. I don't know enough about lacrosse, Jimmy, to tell you how good he is at lacrosse. I mean, I know what people say, and what people say would make me believe that he's better at lacrosse relative to his peers than he is at football relative to his peers. But that's more of just taking what others tell me about how good he is in lacrosse. I don't know enough about lacrosse to be able to say, oh, he's really good. I mean, I can watch and be like, oh, it's impressive. But like, I'm not familiar with lacrosse. So a lot of things they do are impressive to me. I don't know if this is like elite or what it is. I know Notre Dame's an elite team because they just dominate every time I watch them play. But I couldn't tell you if he's better in one or the other. I just, relative to his peers, my impression is I know where he is relative to his peers in football. But when you look at what people tell me about how he is relative to his peers in lacrosse, it sounds like he's an elite player, like the equivalent of like a top 50, type of player in football coming out of high school. So I don't think he's quite that in football. I think he's very good in football, but I think at lacrosse he's incredibly good. And then L.A. Adams is going to round things out here with the super chat. Thank you, L.A. Adams. Appreciate that. The future sure looks bright. I haven't been this excited for the future as an adult. Go Irish, and thanks, IB. Man, you're welcome. But look, you're not alone, man. And like, I know people that are just naturally pessimistic that are just like, dude, it's like, man, it's like I feel like I should be mad about something, but I just love what they were doing. And honestly, I think that's why some people get so fired up about the D-line is because you're just looking around and you're just like, there's not a lot to be upset about. And so people who like to be upset about things can find something to be upset about. But I mean, the future is really bright. There's no doubt. And it's not just this position. In the past, you'd get this really good recruiter who could load up at one position. You think of what Harry Hiestand did on the offensive line, what Denbrock did for a while at receiver. You think about some things that Tony Alford did at running back for a stretch there, and you think about the times when you get a D-line class here and there. But when you look at what they're doing, I mean, quarterback recruiting is at a level we haven't seen in how long? I mean, you had a stretch and I would even argue this stretch is even better than the one from 11 to 15, in my opinion. 11 to 15, you had Everett Golson in 11, who I loved. Gunnar Kiel was a good player. You had Malik in 13. You had Deshaun in 14, Wimbush in 15. You're looking at this stretch of Kenny Minchie and C.J. Carr and Deuce Knight, and then potentially getting a Noah Grubbs type of player in 26, to where this has got a chance to be even better than that. And it's just pure quarterbacks. I think this group is even better than that. Running back recruiting is at a level we haven't seen in a long time. I mean, you talk about getting Chris Tyree in 2020, and then you get Logan Diggs and Aldrich Estime in 2021, Jadarian Price in 2022, Jeremiah and Jabron Payne. You get Jeremiah Love in 23. How are you going to top that? Okay, go get Keidron Young and Aeneas Williams in 2024. And I mean, people are like down on the Justin Thurman, Daniel Anderson class, and I understand it. I wouldn't be. I think for what they need and what they're looking for, I love this two-man class to fit with what they're doing. But there wasn't that long ago, folks. This is way better than the 2018 running back class. Way better than what that class was. And so to me, I get kind of excited about where this team is going. Offensive line's been big time recruiting, tight ends, big time recruiting, receiver 25. Let's see how they finish. But 23 class was really good. The 24 class was really good. They're in on some good players in 26. You talk about linebacker recruiting is at an outstanding level. You talk about what they did in the 22 class with Marcus Freeman, what they did in the 23 class at linebacker with Drake Bowen and Jay Nosberry and Preston Zinner. You talk about the 24 class with Kingston, Bodie, Teddy Rizak. You've got Anthony Saka in the 25 class, Josiah Key, and then potentially finishing it off with Nathaniel Wusu-Boateng and Mad Ferrimo. And then now what they're doing is safety, because safety on defense was the position where, it's like, it's really not good for a while. And then you go out and have the big win with Bronte Johnson last year. And it looks like they may have hit on Kennedy Urlacher. It's very early, but so far, very good returns from Kennedy. But then you come out 25 and you get one of your best safety classes in a long time. And you see it and you're just like, it's everywhere, right? And so now people are mad about D-line recruiting, and it's understandable some of the frustration, but again, it's not good enough to be a championship team, but they're not recruiting poorly. I mean, you can be as upset as you want to be about the D-line class in 2025, but it's relative to, are they recruiting like a championship team? Go back to years when Notre Dame had a D tackle trio of I mean, think about this: Micah Du Treadway, Elijah Taylor, who I was never high on, and Brandon Tiassem. And you look at that, and you compare that to Davion Dixon, Joseph Reif, and Gordy Sufseld. It's not close, folks. It's not close. This is a way better class. And here's the thing: that 2016 DN class or 2015 D tackle class I'm talking about, where they had their only DN they signed was Bo Wallace. He didn't even make it into school. So they had a bad D tackle class. You had Jerry Tillery, he's a good football player, but he was recruited by the offensive line coach, by Harry Heaston. He wasn't even recruited to play defensive line for Notre Dame. And then with this trio, you've got Chris Burgess. Is it good enough to compete with the Georgias? No, it's not good enough yet. But when you look at what the standard is, it's not good enough for the standard. But when you look at what it's been in the past, even that position is still landing Bryce Youngs and Logan Thomases and players like that. It's not good enough, but it's still at least has a chance. As I said before, and when we had the breakdown after Gordy Sufseld's commitment, they're like one player away from completely changing the narrative of where they are in D-line recruiting. That's the spot we're complaining about. Like, when that's the complaint, and it's a legitimate complaint, it is, I'm not taking away, it's a legitimate complaint, but when that's your trouble area, you're recruiting at an elite level. And that's the exciting part about all this. And then landing another player like this, just like Mark Zackery, just makes it even better. So, yeah, L.A. Adams, my man, you're right. There's a lot to be excited about. A lot to be excited about. Now, a lot to prove. Notre Dame still has a lot to prove. But days like today are just a reminder of they're absolutely heading in the right direction. There's no question they're heading in the right direction. So, it's certainly something to be excited about. So, that's going to do it for today's show, everybody. I appreciate y'all being with me. Absolutely love that y'all made some time to join me today and talk about Mark Zackery's big commitment. This is obviously a huge one for Notre Dame, and to be able to land a top 100 player at a prime premium position, and he's not even your only top 100 player, is huge for Notre Dame. Just a great day. We have a class impact article at Irish Breakdown. I have my commitment story at Irish Breakdown. We're going to have an article coming up from Ryan tomorrow, sort of a look at Mark Zackery as a player. I'll have my commit profile coming up on the site later. We'll keep talking about this on the board. So this doesn't do it, right? We're not done yet. And now we need to see if they can finish things off with Jadon Blair at safety. That's going to make things very, very interesting. So make sure you sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com, folks. I'm telling you, if you support this channel and you want to help us grow and you want to be there as we continue to do more things, so signing up for the message board is a way to go. And a way that you can help support what we're trying to do here at Irish Breakdown. Tell people about it. So not only share the physically share the podcast after you've hit the like and subscribe button and notification bell, but also tell your fellow Notre Dame fans about what we got going on here. We do a lot of fun things here, a lot of good breakdowns, and a lot more comments. So you want to check that out as well. And folks, have an awesome rest of your day. We'll have some more stuff coming up this weekend. We'll have a show that I'll record here for Memorial Day that'll be published around 1 o'clock, and then we'll be back for our live show on Tuesday at 2 o'clock on Tuesday. So as of right now, it's Tuesday. 2 o'clock. That's the plan as of right now. I don't know if that's going to be a recruiting show or team show. We'll have to find out. But we'll be back with another live show on Tuesday. So have an awesome Memorial Day weekend. If you're traveling, stay safe, please. And then we'll see you again here very soon on the Irish Breakdown podcast.